think with ancient world data, of course, the interesting thing is that you spend most of your time thinking this is entirely neutral. That why would you worry about ancient world data? But there are plenty of examples. I mean, if you go and start excavating at a site in a relatively remote area, you leave at the end of the summer, and when you come back, the whole site is surrounded by little holes, because everybody thought, well, there has to be something there, and there's a market. So this is very much, so in my kind of world, it's, to some extent, this is about market forces, and it's about kind of saying where you've left the pearl necklace sort of stuff, saying there is stuff here that people would want. There's a second layer in my world, which is this more recently developing phenomenon of labelling something as religiously significant. Most people, when they look at the Parthenon, do not consider its history as a church or its very long history as a mosque. It's been neutralised from both of those uses, and it's been returned to being a temple from the ancient world, because luckily people don't mind so much about temples from the ancient, don't feel threatened by polytheism, so it's kind of safe like that. But it's worth thinking that the very label that you put on a cultural object may increase or diminish its vulnerability. And all those labels are true of the Parthenon. So it's a danger that we're becoming more aware of in my field than we have been in the past. But I'm absolutely foxed as to which kinds of information one should not allow out of the box. I find that just, it's all somewhere. It's all somewhere. Does putting it online, is that a different exercise from putting it in a book?
Well, maybe, so on the eve of the US election, November 8th in the evening, I was in San Francisco. And obviously it was a bit of a shock, as you would appreciate. And the next day I made the rounds and went to a few of the companies, technology companies. That was my plan anyway. But of course everybody was talking about the election. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. So one of the companies who is also in the business of providing crypto solutions as part of their product said, well, this is, we now have 2 months to make the world a better place, and then it will be a lot harder. 2 months referring obviously to the remaining months of the Obama administration. So basically what I'm trying to say with this anecdote is that what's ethical in terms of to hand over to a government depends on the government. It's very different if you're in Turkey, very different situation, or in China than from Germany, for instance, on the other end of the scale. But of course in the United States, we just had a shift of government in the most unexpected way, and a few very tough questions are posing themselves. So I think a lot of people are defaulting into a let's treat the government as an infosec adversary type of mindset. And to be entirely honest, I'm partly sympathetic to that view, as ironically I think quite a lot of people inside the intelligence community today.
Okay. I'm going to kind of slightly change the subject in that we're talking about responsibility and the way in which organisations or academics or different types of audiences make decisions about handling data that's going to be out there in the public realm. I'm going to talk about how many of you have looked at police.uk as a website? Anybody looked at police.uk? Okay, so police.uk, for those that you don't know, is a website where you can Google your home address, you can put in your home address, and what it draws up is a kind of landscape of the crimes that have happened in your neighbourhood within the last month, those kind of things. Now, this is an incredibly interesting data set for a variety of different reasons. One that is national, so you can more or less put in a postcode from anywhere and get this picture. Now the interesting thing about ethics from the point of view of this particular development was the police were under pressure, obviously, to put out something that did show risk at the community level, partly because, of course, it's their responsibility to try and speak to that risk and to manage that risk. But they also knew that releasing this data at the individual level, for example, was going to cause all sorts of trouble. So what they had to do as an organisation is think very carefully about the level of aggregation at which they provided this data. And they also had to think about, for instance, use of this type of data source for other reasons. So, for instance, was it going to be used by the insurance sector, and how might that affect things? Yes. And another thing is, we talked earlier about fear of crime. Another large problem they have from an ethical point of view is whether or not this will make communities feel less safe, or feel that their community was somehow being stigmatised because there was higher levels of crime in that area than anybody had thought of. So, I mean, I think that it's not just something that is an academic issue. You have to think about what we do, the role of organisations who have got access to data which is provided by the public, and how they ought to actually feed back that information in a way that's useful, but also ethically appropriate and safe for consumption by the public. So that was my story on that topic.
So, I suppose just a couple of things come to mind. The first thing is, it's interesting in my field, the sort of variation across countries in attitudes to, in this case, health data. So what we do here is not possible elsewhere in Europe, or sometimes is possible. So Scandinavia, in my field, have had a long tradition for being very sort of full of data, link lots of things together, do all sorts of kind of interesting work with. And I'm told that sort of stems from Lutheran churches who used to sort of collect this information assiduously. And so in some ways you get the feeling that people in Scandinavia don't mind that data being used in this way fairly freely, because they feel that government and the sort of society is a relatively benign one looking after their interests. Whereas, understandably in Germany and areas of Europe where governments historically have been less benign, there's a lot of suspicion and a lot of bad data privacy, and they wouldn't be able to do what we did in terms of healthcare data. It just would be completely not possible at all. I wonder actually whether in the UK, and my theory is, again just in my field, is that it's not so much that we trust our government, it's not so much we distrust our government, but we're relatively free because we view our government as fairly incompetent, and the idea is that they wouldn't be able to do much with the data even if they did get hold of it. And that may or may not be true, but I mean there certainly seems to be an openness to use of at least health data in our country, and a lack of sort of vociferous objection. There are obviously people who object to it, but it seems to be less than in certain areas of the country. In terms of other use of healthcare data, it's not. I mean, with that sort of information, I mean, we sit within the NHS, and it's up to the NHS to decide who gets hold of NHS data. Generally speaking, that's sort of out of our control, and that's not done with the sort of databases that I'm dealing with. It's done at a trust level. They ask trusts for information, they ask GPs for information, and you get sort of certain amounts of payment if you provide to NHS Central, as it were, that information. There is beginning to be a bit of unease about the amount of information that's collected and how much information is being collected from NHS providers that might be basically used to help industry bid for the things that NHS currently provides. So there's certainly a strong feeling increasingly in trusts that actually we're providing potentially sort of competitive information that will be used to by the competition in future as the NHS potentially sort of fragments. So there is a concern about that, I think what tends to happen is that trusts tend to sort of produce officially rather sort of information of not terribly good standard to the centre, and everyone gets away with it, and no one cares too much.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to
yes.
pick up on that. You made a very interesting point when you were speaking about a lot of people assuming that kind of you already had the data. I think that's another thing. There's the over-assumption about what is known, and I'm sure that's true in the security world too. That they know everything we're doing, kind of thing. And a lot of people veer between thinking, it's not a problem, it'll all get lost, or they know everything I do anyway. And a funny kind of spectrum.
Well, yes, and it just goes across to people feeling that Tesco know everything about them.
Yes.
Whoever knows everything about them, so your doctor knowing everything about you, or the NHS knowing everything about you is, is just the same as everything else. Whereas in fact, actually, we would have to jump through way more hoops than Tesco or Amazon would have to do using the data or these sorts of things. It's the same as if you stand in a street corner doing a survey of people, you could just do that to your heart's content. If you call it a research project, you've got to have all sorts of bureaucracy around sort of getting ethics approval and everything else.
It's interesting that people's attitude to Tesco having their data is rather different to their attitude to government having their data. But maybe the General Data Protection Regulation will change all that. But I'd like to move us on to a slightly different question, because both Rob and Kate gave us their definitions of big data, and they used multiple numbers of these, depending on who you were listening to. But both of them, I think, picked up a little bit on the veracity V, and that's really, I think, the topic of this question about participatory mapping, which is, I guess, recast. It's about crowdsourced data and how you ensure that that's reliable and that you can actually use it to infer and make sensible sort of decisions. So it'd be quite interesting to hear the panel's views on that, and maybe since Kate spoke about participatory mapping, maybe we could start with you, Kate, on your views on that.
Yes, I mean, I hope that it came across from what I'm saying that there are lots of associated problems with using crowdsourced data, first of all. I mean, the fact that we have the clustering of these of contributions, and that we have some people that contribute far more to these kind of collective activities it has got to be really obviously articulated with any use of this kind of data source. So first of all, we have that big issue. Secondly, we all know that there are going to be populations, there's going to be certain demographics that are going to be much more attracted to contributing to these ideas and these sources, and we know that these people are going to be overrepresented in the data. Every picture that we use using this kind of data is going to be a biased view of the world. It's not going to be giving us information about the way that the population as a whole see a particular problem. And we've therefore got to be very, very careful when we make inferences about what that data is telling us. However, I do think that because of some of the things you can get from this kind of crowdsourced data, we should actually use the data with that limitation in mind. So if we didn't start using this data, and we didn't start farming it for why having, for instance, spatial and temporal information provided on people's feelings about things in the environment, we're never going to get anywhere in understanding the power of using a data source in that type of way. Having said that, I do think that over time, if we start relying on this kind of data too much for informing policy, we might start getting into trouble. And I think the reason for that is because it is purely representing certain populations. And so, for instance, if I did come up with these fear of crime hotspots, and I said we need to police these fear of crime hotspots because I found these in my data, and then we got there, and they're all just student residents because they happen to be the places where, the people that were interacting were those people, then we have got a problem on our hands. So I think it's a little bit that I'm a believer in exploration of data, and I think that's what we actually need to be doing. But we need to be doing it within the articulations of the limitations of this sort of mapping process.
So I want to go to Rob next, because you weren't talking about participatory mapping, but you were talking about patients and individual citizens providing data into your environment. So you're facing, or you will face, the same sorts of problems potentially in the long term. So do you have a view on that issue of reliability of data?
Yes, I mean, as I said, I don't think the sort of crowd element is as much of what we do. If we want to know about an area, we'll go and survey it, and obviously there's still problems with not getting good response rates and all the rest. Try to sort of get some inferences that way. Whereas it's always difficult to know what the population is that was being said. The only thing is that there are examples now of research projects using these to kind of create large samples, but these are people that you then find out a lot about and follow them through over time. Colleagues of mine collected about sort of 20,000 people within a few days to look at brain aging, and also people who would then sort of participate in trials of online sort of interventions to try and sort of improve brain function, that sort of type of thing. So that worked quite well from that point of view, but they weren't trying to say anything about the population in general. I mean, the patient population, yes. I mean, in my view, the key thing that I need to instill to people coming using our data most is just think through the research question, and is this the right way of doing it? You have to bear in mind that patients are patients for a reason. They're not a general population. They are people with a particular disorder, and they're people with a disorder that have got into that particular service. So there are plenty of illnesses where most people never even get to their GP with it. It's just out there. Depression is an example. Most people with depression are rarely known to their GP. They rarely get treatment. They sort of live with it, out there. People with Alzheimer's the same. People aren't recognised, they don't get diagnosis. We're lucky if we get diagnosis on half the people with Alzheimer's out there in the population. So if you're then doing a research project that's based on people who are known to and have made medical contact, you just need to be rather careful about the conclusions you draw, and it's really as simple as that. There's not an awful lot you can do more than that. Except that mostly what we are doing is just taking a group of people and seeing what happens to them over time. Yes, that group of people may not be completely representative, but predicting what happens to that group of people has still got some importance. We can do it across large numbers. I think it's also the problem about people coming in and out of services, and patient records are only there when people are with a particular service. Primary care, well, you're there with your GP all the time until you switch GP and they're collecting all that information. But for somewhere like a mental health care or hospital service, you're in and out of that for a reason. So it's more to do with framing the research questions so that isn't a problem, and avoiding the ones where it is.
Charlotte, can I bring you on archaeological data?
Well, I was thinking, of course, we have tiny data. I mean, in terms of all of this, your data is large compared to our data. And absolutely full of holes. One of the consequences of putting a computer on the desk of every academic was to make everybody think, at last we will develop statistics for the ancient world. And there are more dodgy statistics in the study of the ancient world, I would claim, than in any other area, and that's a big claim. But it's this desperate wish to fill the holes in an area of study where, even more than you, all we have is snapshots. A bit of stuff has survived for a whole series of completely random reasons. And so the word has to go on being veracity. The valuable thing is drilling down to the quality of the basic data on which you are working, and making it clear at every stage in the process, we dug on this side of the hill because we didn't own the other side of the hill. Doesn't mean that the palace isn't the other side of the hill, but we couldn't get there. It's as fundamental as that. It's very, very tempting to leave that out of your footnote. It's not what you want to say. You want to say, I made this discovery which transforms the world. But you need, nowadays, more than ever, there is no excuse for avoiding remorseless honesty, because you've got the space to put that footnote in and say, we only don't want to say.
Just state the obvious extremely quickly. Authentication and anonymity. The higher the threshold for authentication, the higher the quality of participatory contributions in my mind. And completely anonymous platforms tend to lend themselves to trolling and abuse. I think Twitter and actually Wikipedia editing as well are good examples.
So we'll move away from the anonymous Slido contributions then and go to Adam. Whoever Adam is, he'll maybe identify himself later. But the question he's posing maybe relates in some senses to one of the other V's, which is the issue around value, because people, particularly in the cybersecurity area, seem to be reluctant to share information for all sorts of reasons, to do with reputation, but also to do with intrinsic value of business and so on. So the question is, are governments and businesses sharing enough data on cyber incidents? So it is very specifically a cybersecurity question. So I think I'll go to you first, Thomas, to get your view on that, and then we'll see if the other panelists want to comment on it as well.
I mean, it's often stated that governments are not, companies, especially but also governments, are not sharing enough information for the reasons you mentioned there. We just point out that it's at the end of 2016, the UK is spending whatever the latest count is, a lot of money on cybersecurity today, and yet we can't name a single targeted, high-profile, advanced persistent threat attack on a UK target. We can't name a single one. So, I mean, yes, absolutely, it's a huge problem, but I think it won't go away, even if we complain in regulators about it.
Does anyone else want to take a position?
I did wonder, actually, when you were talking, whether it doesn't show how important you are if you've become the subject of cyber attacks, so that it might become a badge of honour.
No, I mean...
I was hacked, and therefore I get to tell everybody that I've been the subject of cyber attacks. It shows how important I am, but I'm not sure that would work.
Just on the kind of broad topic of governments and industry sharing data, in my field, my experience is it kind of comes and goes, and I don't quite know why it comes and goes, but there seem to be periods when government departments are more interested in our case, in sort of linking data linkages and things, and you find someone in a government department who says, yeah, that's great, yeah, we can answer this and this, and they're actually excited about the question. And you certainly can't do any of this if the government even feels remotely lukewarm about it, because it involves a bit of effort on both sides, and it's very easy for the civil service to push it into the wrong grass, and just it never quite happens. But if it hits the right policy area, what you want to do, it seems to be. I mean, an industry likewise in healthcare industry are under quite a lot of scrutiny. At least the pharmaceutical industry are, and they're much more open to data sharing because they want to be seen as better companies than they have been seen in the past. They're not sort of widely respected companies, and so they like to get out there and do sort of certain altruistic things with data, and there's a lot more scrutiny about industry opening up their data, so you don't get a pharmaceutical company quietly finding that there's a side effect and burying the information, which has happened, as we know has happened in the past. There's a lot of, they know that there's legal problems down the line for that, and it's not worth it while.
I mean, it might be worth just observing that there is a National Computer Emergency Response Team called CERT UK, which is now part of the National Cyber Security Centre, and they operate a cyber information sharing partnership, which has a few thousand members, and they're recording a few thousand incidents every month. But within regulated industries, there's quite a resistance to sharing information about incidents with government because of potential legal fallout and so on. Although there are good examples, the banking sector, for example, does have a very good information sharing procedure because many of the banks take the view that if they're being attacked today, then tomorrow it will be other banks, and likewise, if they share information about the incidents they're seeing, hopefully the other banks will give them pre-warning of the incidents that they're seeing. So there are some quite enlightened approaches to information sharing across the space in cybersecurity, I would say. But sorry, I'm not a panelist. Kate, do you want to say something about information sharing?
Well, I think the only thing I had an observation which is a bit to the side of the point, but I just think that the other thing is there's a distinction obviously between cybersecurity and cybercrime, and I think that actually sometimes the kind of the border between these two things get muddied, and I think actually the public are probably quite often interested in cybercrime rather than cybersecurity, and trying to actually, you know, to think about the way in which we record online cybercrime as individual incidents is very different to thinking of the kind of high-level cybersecurity attacks we're talking about. So I do think it's also about something we need to be thinking about from a cybersecurity point of view is quite literally educating the public that there's a difference between the kind of minor infractions or the incidents that they might experience individually and what's going on at the high level. Just an observation that we've noticed from our perspective.
I think we'll take the question from WS next, who I assume is not William Shakespeare, but this is specifically targeted at Thomas. But I think actually de-anonymisation applies equally to Rob's work and also Kate's at least. I'm sure Charlotte will have something to say about that. But Thomas, because it's targeted at you, let's hear your views on that. At the moment, I mean, it's around data linkage and the fact, I guess, that if you can link data, then you can get a much better handle on apparently anonymised data and begin to understand what the source of it is.
Yes. So it's a huge question. The question of de-anonymization, it applies in different contexts. There has also been a lot of research on Tor de-anonymization, which is a separate issue from this one. But I would just say that there's always a difference between academic research on de-anonymization that almost takes place in a lab type environment and in the wild, under pressure, under time pressure, with imperfect data, work on de-anonymization. So absolutely yes, de-anonymization, if I may just abstractly observe this, may sometimes be possible, but I think the friction that we see in real life shouldn't be underestimated. So for instance, we know that GCHQ recently claimed that they were able to de-anonymize photograph, but they didn't say how often they don't succeed, etc. So it's all the difficulties often.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte, do you have anything you want to say about this? You don't have to.
No, not really. I was just thinking it's the sort of thing we do in the study of the ancient world the entire time. Trying to work out a random source which turns out where it's come from. Reading Hara, saying it's...
Rob, you were talking a lot about data linkages. So
yes, I mean, it's obviously a sensitive issue with healthcare data. The thing is, you don't need that many variables to potentially de-anonymize. You need about 5 or 6, and it's, you can probably people showing this and sort of identified people based on 5 or 6 different sources, just single variables from those. So you can never basically claim that a database is anonymised, even if you've stripped out everything under the sun. And so we don't claim to. We talk about pseudonymisation or functional anonymisation, meaning that it's very unlikely that someone's actually going to identify you because you're analysing samples of 1,000 or something like that. And our oversight, one of the main roles of our oversight committee is to be rather careful about people wanting to do analyses of very small samples that are quite tightly defined, or they can have, say, a forensic history of people who committed a crime or something like that, where you might know that person from the papers or something like that. So we do keep a kind of eye out for that. You can never give a guarantee, and so hence the issue with not attempting a technical solution on its own. The solution to using data in research of this nature is the governance solution. It's the wider structure of making sure we know who's using it and what projects they're doing, that there's a approval process around it. And I think, my sort of feeling is, well, if you were wanting to sort of do something malicious on the databases we have, well, you wouldn't use our research databases, which have been stripped out. You'd hack into the health record itself, because that's not, that's there and it's electronic and it's not anonymized. But then it strikes me, having worked, talked to informaticians who work with the complex databases that are health records. If you were clever enough to get into a health record, you'd sort of be clever enough to get into a bank. And it would make more sense if you really wanted to do something malicious. You get a lot more reward out of hacking into a bank than you would out of hacking into someone's health records. So I think it's more of an issue actually for health records generally. But then people, of course, forget the days of paper records, which sounds a bit more secure, but plenty of examples of people putting on a white coat and wandering into a ward and digging through the medical files and picking one out and walking out the door with it. That used to go on periodically. And so, electronic health records are an awful lot more secure than old hospital systems and people leaving notes in the back of their cars and the rest of it. We can't do that anymore, at least. So I think, it's important to bear in mind, actually, we have come forward in this. And yes, you do worry about anything electronic and potential for hacking, but, it wasn't as if anything was that secure beforehand.
Seems that question for Professor Hankin is kind of important.
Because maybe I'll come back to that at the end. Kate, you haven't had a chance to talk about...
I suppose I was just going to say that actually this issue is something that has been troubling us, and of course this is one of the reasons why we've built our data lab. Yes. Because what we want to be able to do is start connecting between different disciplines, and so for instance, connecting between health and crime data is an obvious area where we haven't really done as much as we could do. If we do start going down that line, we need to be able to do it in a very safe environment. And if you do put procedures into place where you can do the research at the individual level, but actually the individual themselves, their identity doesn't matter to that research, and that the output from the research is at the aggregate level anyway, giving us an interesting theoretical link between different things. I think that's the way we need to pursue the research agenda. And so one of the best ways of moving forward with this is setting up systems which allow that possibility of data linking, but do it in an environment where everybody is happy with the security of the situation.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to continue to ignore that question for the moment, but particularly since my name is misspelt. We may come back to that later. But what I wanted to maybe pick up on, actually, I think, which is quite important and goes to the sort of back to the ethical question, really, which is around informed disclosure decisions, informed consent, I guess, really partly as well. So it's this bottom question here about whether people are actually able to make informed disclosure decisions, given the information asymmetry and uncertain information disclosure environment in which we live. Yeah. Yes, sorry, I meant to say who's going to answer that first, but you all have a chance to look at it now. So I think possibly I'll start with Rob again on this one, because I think this is probably at the heart of healthcare data too.
Struggling to understand the question. Informed. Do you know what's being meant by an informed?
Is the person who wrote it in here?
I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So
yes, can you just explain what you mean by informed disclosure?
Yeah, so I was originally thinking about your talk, and but just generally, when people are making the decision around whether they should disclose or not, we always talk about when people talk about privacy, they talk about this calculus of whether the costs outweigh the benefit. But I guess the question is, when there's so much uncertainty about how your data will potentially be used, how do you make an informed decision?
I think that's fair enough. Our response is just to do the best we can, so we just provide as much information as possible about how data are used, and we have to go through the various procedures to demonstrate that we're doing that, and a lot of regulatory bodies require you to sort of say this is what we tell people, this is how we disseminate our information. We have a whole sort of section on linkages. So the difficulty is always knowing whether people either can or bother to find out about that, because it's like if you take part in a drug trial, you get, if you want to know every single possible side effect of the medication you're taking, you're talking about reading something small print this long, and how much information can one provide, and how much does it get before which it just kind of swamps people in too much information. But we try to provide everything we can. We have a public accessible list of all the projects that are being done on the database, with a list of all the linkages, and then we sort of regularly disseminate the fact that, it obviously has to be kept online because it's a reasonable body of material, so we have to just regularly publicise the linkage so that anyone who wanted to, who was concerned about it, was able to. There isn't actually in law, there isn't actually a sort of obligation to have an opt-out. We wanted to put one in because I didn't really want anyone worried about the use of their data to not be able to kind of have it withdrawn, and so we've always had that, and it's always been very explicit. But you're right about consent and whether people can make those decisions. There's been a lot of public consultations about use of healthcare data, and what sorts of things do people want it used for or don't want it used for. Genetics comes up, and people do sort of worry about genetic studies. But then most people, in fact all people providing any genetic material that we would have linkages to, have specifically consented into that particular study on that their material will be used in that way, so it's a much more informed consent type approach. You wouldn't have genetic material used without your knowledge. But you're right, and I would say though that the environment is certainly quite a lot tighter than it was when I started research, where there was much more of a laissez-faire attitude to once people had consented into a research project, then that was their data and it could be used in whatever way, broadly speaking, possible, whereas nowadays it's much more specified in terms of how information will be used, at least in healthcare research.
So maybe we can come back along, Kate, if you...
I think my reaction to it is that one thing we're not very good at is providing feedback, and I think that's one of the issues with it. So, used for what, and how useful has it been? And I think sometimes what you do when you give your consent for the use of your data, it kind of goes up into this big data cloud in the sky, and you never see it again. And sometimes I think on certain projects, we're not very good at feeding back why that information was useful, what we got out of it. And it being then taken on to something else, if people are going to be more likely to share data with us in the long term, we need to start doing better feedback, I think. And the other thing is we consent to things all the time, and then we leave them going without remembering that we're consenting to them. And I was joking with somebody earlier that one of the instances happened to me is my husband said when I got back from Heathrow Airport very early one Monday morning from Australia, he said, "You went into Marks and Spencer's in Heathrow Airport," and it was because he could see where I was because I'd shared my location information with him. And I was surprised he worked out that I'd done that. But we're doing this kind of thing all the time. We're consenting to stuff, and we're forgetting that people might be using the information in certain ways. And so I do think this kind of feedback of what it's been using for and reminding us why it is that we're consenting to it in the first place is an important thing.
But I would just add to that realistically speaking, although there's a lot of talk about surveillance and sophisticated threats, I think the more real life threat scenario is actually people in your family, because oftentimes people want to hide. Children may want to hide a few things from their parents, and parents may want to hide a few things from their children, and partners and whatnot. So that I think is a more realistic threat scenario in the context of this global.
And I think people are incredibly on alert, noticing with students, when I was a tutor to students, they either thought I knew absolutely everything that they hadn't told me, because somehow I just knew, or they would tell me something, they'd hand over information to me that I might not, didn't necessarily need to have. But I think we don't train people to think about what this thing called my data, whatever it is, I don't think there's any useful discussion. It should be happening very young. It should be happening at about 15, if not, well, at this rate, it should be happening at about 5, because they're clicking on all these things and it's all happening, and we're completely, those of us who teach them in particular, are totally behind the curve in helping people to think about what do I mean when I say my data. You need to think about that before you sign the form.
So we have about 5 minutes left, so let's go to the question of careers. We won't take the question that's up there, but we'll talk about careers. This meeting was about data science, really, not about cybersecurity, but you can talk about cybersecurity if you want. Do you think there is such a thing as a career in data science, or do you think actually the only useful data scientists are people who have lots of domain expertise and are really from your own culture? So really, is there a worthwhile career in data science, or cybersecurity, if you like, that people should be pursuing? Let's start with you, Thomas, since you caught my eyes first, and then we'll go to Kate and Rob, and then go back to Charlotte.
I think there's a pragmatic answer and if you like, a principled one. The pragmatic answer is yes, absolutely. The skill set that you apply if you do data science, cybersecurity, a computer science degree with a decent specialization is probably a good investment of time in this day. There can be no doubt. But on a more principled level, just to state the obvious, I think linguistic. I think right now at Stanford University there are approximately around 10 linguistics students who are not focused on computational linguistics, but just the classic version of linguistics. Don't quote me on that number. But the problem is, you probably learn more if you focus on some of the classics and some of the humanities. If we focus too much on the technical aspects of some of these disciplines, I think we risk, as a society, as an academic community as well, we risk losing a skill set that I think will have value for centuries. And I think we're now in this strange moment where everybody thinks studying technology can make up for it.
Kate?
Yeah, my thing is that, I think what we do at the Jill Downing Institute is we kind of take people who are specialists and we turn them into data scientists, actually. So I think that's perhaps what we need to do. We need to have people with skills from a perspective that then think about applying those skills using data that's available to them to do it. And so I think that it's both. We see it both ways around. We also see people who are very much into data science and the technical side of things who start converting into becoming crime scientists. And so I think it's definitely a kind of two-way process. But I do think I think sometimes in isolation that could be a dangerous thing. I think that perhaps there's lots of areas where you can be a data scientist that's a specialist, and there's loads of scope for things to do. I mean, we're very multidisciplinary, but I do think that you need to have multiple disciplines. I mean, I suppose something that's a parallel. Earlier I said that I think I'm a frustrated geographer, and I mean, if you think of geographical information science, that has got its own agenda, its own. I mean, people go to university to study geographical information science as a topic, and then they apply that to different fields. So I mean, for many years, people that go on GIS courses and have those kinds of transferable skills that you learn as a GIS scientist, do go into all sorts of different types of industries. So I mean, I think it's about skilling up in more than one field. In whichever way you do it, is up to you, or is naturally how you do it. But I think perhaps doing that is the way to make yourself most marketable.
Yeah, I'd give a very similar answer actually. Multidisciplinarity is the key. We started with virtually nothing when we began with this database and built up as a team just through bits and pieces here and there. And are still in that sort of phase of expansion where we'll take all comers, and if someone's got a skill set, we think, yes, it could be used in that way, that particular area, in conjunction usually with, you know, inevitably in collaboration with sort of others more at the applied end, then we'll take them on if we can find the money to do so. And I think the team approach is essential, as I mentioned in my talk. And I think there's a huge, I think in terms of applied data science, applying it to an area that's interesting and you find socially useful, whether it's, you know, crime, archaeology, cybersecurity, health, is an interesting thing. If you work in the public sector, you won't get the sort of industry salary, and so hence, you know, there's that sort of competition. But we're increasingly trying to sort of work with people who are already in industry, who just want to do a bit of sessional work for us, programmers and the like, coders. There's a lot of interesting applied work to do where people are earning, you know, into sort of good salary in Tech City or something like that, but want to do a bit of applied health care orientated work on the side, you know, will again sort of accept. We realise we have to be sometimes a bit more flexible rather than just sort of say, okay, we'll create a post and you can apply for it. Well, why not, you know, just create some sessions and have a kind of pool of people who regularly work for us, work with us on sort of projects of that nature. So yeah, we're very open to it, and I think there are careers. It's very early days in my field. We were at the first in my particular area, and so we're just building the careers now as people have matured through the system and are looking for sort of longer term sort of prospects in it. We're having to kind of follow them all, but they're the trailblazers, and they'll create the careers for everyone else coming through.
Thank you.
Well, I work a lot with developers, and it's all about partnership because they know all this stuff that I don't know, and actually I know some stuff they don't know. And what's fun is that moment in a project when the developer you're working with gets really excited by the question you're asking, and you get really excited by the solution they're proposing. And the most important thing about that kind of partnership is realising that it's not sending your work to the typing pool. It's about working together. So if you do study to be a data scientist, you've then got to go out and look for the interesting questions that you want to be involved in answering. Now, it might just be about how do we sell more butter, but there may be more interesting questions. They were less well paid, but there were more interesting questions that you can get involved in answering.
And maybe if I can then just have a final word, I would say that the future is bright for careers in cybersecurity, unfortunately. I'm quite sad to say that, but cybersecurity is a very multidisciplinary topic. It's a socio-technical challenge. It's not just for computer scientists, it's also for social scientists and a full broad spectrum of academic disciplines. In a lot of the thinking behind the new National Cybersecurity Strategy, you'll see the phrase security by design, and yet you'll also see people talk about a 1.5 million shortfall in skilled coders and developers in the world at the moment. So I think, unfortunately, there are going to be many years before we are anywhere near solving the cybersecurity challenge. So I think there are good career prospects for whoever and the 5 people who supported that question in the cybersecurity area. So on that note, I think I'm sorry to say we've run over slightly, but I'd like to hand over to Chris